Thank you. Thank you, Rooftop Revolutionaries, for singing us in. Really appreciate it.
It was just me singing.
Well, fair point. But yes, everybody should check out that album by Rooftop Revolutionaries. Or at the very least, watch the YouTube music video. So this is the show.
There isn't actually a music video for that song.
Well, watch one of the other ones.
Lee is failing as my PR person.
I'm doing my best.
Not least of all because he's PRing a band that doesn't exist anymore.
Oh, yeah. It'd be so bad if someone were to buy one of your older albums and listen to them.
No, not at all. I'm just saying that...
Sorry, I will never again say a nice word about the opening music to this podcast.
You could foreshadow
I was going to,
music.
but I was afraid I'd get grief for that too if I did foreshadow.
No, you can foreshadow.
All right, there may or may not, folks. I know this will get your mouth watering, but there may or may not be an upcoming Eleanor Goldfield album.
Yes, not a Rooftop Revolutionaries album, but an Eleanor album, which is decidedly not as cool of a name, I have to admit. But I talked to my parents about why they didn't name me Rooftop Revolutionaries, but there wasn't a satisfactory answer there.
They probably didn't have enough mushrooms.
Are you saying I was high when I came up with that name?
No, I'm saying it'd be a weird name for a child. Okay, there's a difference. Yes, an amazing album coming up soon in the next few months. Keep your ears out. Can you keep an ear out? Keep an ear out.
An ear to the ground?
Keep an ear to the grindstone.
And
your nose to the train tracks. Okay, this is Common Censored, the show where we talk censored stories and people, sensible solutions, and common ground movements to fight and build.
And sometimes other stuff, like noses to grindstones. What the fuck does that come from anyway?
They used to have grindstones. That's what I got. No, it was what? They'd sharpen tools and things on the grindstone, right?
But what does that have to do with your nose?
Well, it means get to work. I mean, don't sharpen your nose, but it should be close because you're leaning in.
You guys can't see what Lee's doing right now, but he's really
he's leaning.
He's really doing.
I
the
love how you now
bit.
are doing something visual. You're like, you can't see what Lee's doing, but he's doing this. Look at what I'm doing. Yes, I believe it comes from the old grindstone. And when people are working hard, they had their nose down by the grindstone.
That sounds very unsafe.
If I have this wrong, I want everyone to email us. Okay, so thanks for joining us. Another amazing and magical week in Biden's America. And
the first one, really.
And while the mainstream media acts like Biden is God's gift to America, like he's been sent down on a little cloud and he has his little adorable cherub belly poking out, which he does have, if you've seen. He doesn't button the bottom buttons of his shirt, so it's pretty rough. So
can't unhear that, folks.
Most of mainstream media, at least the liberal side of things, CNN, MSNBC, NPR, et cetera, act like Biden is God's gift to presidents. Oh my God, look how wonderful things are now because we got rid of Trump. Fox News, on the other hand, is in the rational world calling him an anarcho-Marxist, socialist, communist bloodletter, I believe was what they called him.
I feel like it would just be easier if they just said witch. Like, why don't we just...
Warlock.
A warlock.
Yeah.
There can be male witches.
Exactly. Listen, if you want to be a witch, you be a witch. But the truth is neither of those things. I love how our mainstream media, which is supposedly the allowable things you can talk about, which we'll get to more of that and how YouTube has decided what's allowable and what's not later in this episode. And so while mainstream media acts like Biden is God's gift to America and Fox News, as I said, anarchist, Marxist, socialist, communist, fucking warlock. The truth is neither of those things. And those are the only two things you're really allowed. Those are the two positions you're allowed to have on mainstream media. The reality is neither of those. The reality is Biden is not a Marxist, socialist, communist. He is a cutthroat capitalist, fucking ravenous, profit all over all else capitalist, funded mostly by credit card companies and big banks, or at least they're his top funder, along with health insurance companies. And yet he is not as right-wing, maybe, on certain issues, as some of the people Fox News might like. but that does not make him a socialist.
Well, I think the difference is that he doesn't come out and say that he's as right wing, which is really, this is the main difference between the Democrats and the Republicans, right? The Republicans say that like come out right out and say, like, of course people shouldn't have health care. This is fucking stupid. Of course not. The Democrats say we absolutely believe that people should have health care, which is why we have the Affordable Care Act. And you're like, but those two things are mutually exclusive. So really it's that Biden is as right wing as Republicans. It's just, and the Democratic Party is basically the Republican Party, with wrapped in like a rainbow flag. So it's just that Fox News doesn't like that he's not as honest about it, which fine. I mean, I wish he was honest about it too, but
you could call some of the things he's doing as not as right wing. So something I just talked about in my live stream was, for example, you could say that Trump pulling out of the climate accord and him joining back in is less right wing. But as you and I have discussed many times, the climate accords is borderline meaningless.
But right, that's my point.
Yeah, no, but I'm largely agreeing with you, but I'm saying he is less right wing than, say, Tucker Carlson or something, in a slight way.
Well, yeah, but the point being is that, like, for instance, the Paris Climate Agreement, or for instance, like Obama's quote unquote coal regulations, which specified that you can't leave coal slurry, which is the toxic waste from washing coal.
I thought coal Slurpees were the one that tasted like Coca-Cola. No?
Yeah. You couldn't leave coal slurry in an unlined earthen dam for more than 3 years. Well, here's the thing. An unlined earthen dam means that shit seeps into the ground. So after 3 years, there's nothing there to clean up anyway. So what
Makes it easy.
Exactly. So what Obama basically did was tell the coal companies, look, you don't have regulations, but on paper, it looks like there are regulations that are, restricting pollution. Same thing with the Paris Climate Agreement. It gets to look like there's, something going on to address climate change and climate chaos, but there really isn't. So, and a lot of Republican lawmakers know this, which is why they weren't, raising a stink about, some of them were, of course, but a lot of them weren't, because they knew there's nothing actually in here that does a damn thing. So again, it's this, the Paris Climate Agreement is a perfect example of what the Democratic Party does, which is fucking nothing, but they make it sound like they're doing a lot.
And in that vein, let's get to what Biden has done about health insurance. Going into this election, obviously one of the big fights was over Medicare for All. A lot of Bernie Sanders support came from Medicare for All. Huge push for that. It's supported by 70% of Americans, over 80% of Democrats. I think almost 90% of Democrats support Medicare for All. And so Biden has said he's not for Medicare for All. He's for making Obamacare better. And we're in the middle of a pandemic when over 15 million people have lost their employer-based health care already in this pandemic, and so what is Biden doing to make sure that in these horrible times everyone gets health insurance?
The opposite, Lee. He's doing the opposite.
What is the opposite, Alex?
So basically, what this does is it's a big handout to insurance companies.
The Cobra guarantee.
Who basically, this is a report from Jacobin magazine. It adopts proposals from health insurance lobbying groups. There was a recent letter to lawmakers that were demanding, lucrative subsidies for insurance companies because, they've had a really hard time in the recent pandemic.
Have they ever?
Because they've recorded record profits.
I can't tell you the number of mom and pop health insurance outfits I've seen boarded up their windows since the pandemic began. And it's so sad to see that little sign that says, yes, we're open. And you see that it's all boarded up. So really they just forgot to take down the sign at the just at the mom and pop health insurance places.
Right.
Yeah.
There's no such thing, guys. So don't worry.
Don't write letters, please.
Please, yeah. So insurance companies, as you might expect in the midst of a pandemic, have been recording record profits. Does that make sense? Have reported record. I think that's what I meant to say.
I bet they write them down. They record them too. They record.
Yeah. Okay. This was one of those like Polish polish moments where I managed to fit both definitions of that word. Anyway, you have derailed. Okay, so
Get your ear back to the train tracks.
and my nose on the whetstone. No, the something, whatever. Okay, so it's been a long day. Okay, so basically these Biden's plan is literally just an insurance lobbying group's letter to lawmakers. It's kind of like when
Love letter to lawmakers.
right. It's kind of like when ALEC, if folks, the Legislative Exchange Council, have been writing a lot of legislation that shows up predominantly like in state houses and things like that. But there have been instances where legislators have put forward bills in their, state houses, and they haven't even bothered to take away the ALEC logo. So it legit is logo. Just like, hey, this lobbying group wrote a bill, and now I'm passing it on, and I didn't even bother changing the fucking letterhead. You're welcome.
Right.
It's basically the same concept. Biden is taking a wish list from big insurance companies and making it law. So basically what this does, Biden's plan would shovel billions of dollars to private health insurance.
To Cobra.
Insurers by providing subsidies for Americans to buy coverage through the ACA marketplace, which is far more expensive than government health care programs. And that has been, it's been plagued by high rates of claim denials. So it would also, this is separate to your point, Lee. It would also subsidize COBRA continuation through September, which allows workers to keep their employer health insurance plans when they're laid off. But, spoiler, they have to keep paying for it as if they were still employed.
So, yeah, the idea of Cobra is you get fired and then, okay, just pay for your health care coverage and we'll keep you on it, even though you don't have a job. But how can you pay? Most people can't pay for it if they don't have a job. So it's like barely helpful. I mean, I guess if you had like a $900,000 surgery, maybe it's helpful. But and I do love that it's named after a viper because that's about what it is.
It feels like getting a snake bite, like right in your boob, or maybe your balls if you're a guy. I don't know.
Feels like a boob ball,
a
snake
boob ball snake bite.
Boob ball and
yes.
snake bite.
and basically as with anything else, follow the money. Biden's inaugural committee received donations from at least two major health insurers, Anthem and Centene, which both happen to offer plans on the marketplace exchanges. Again, those are the ones that are more expensive and hand out more claim denials.
And I did see a chart recently that showed that Biden, among the Democratic candidates, had the most donations from health insurance and healthcare providers into his campaign. Now, I think the chart is a little misleading because obviously he was in he running for presidency longer than anyone else, so he's going to have, if he's being donated to by these companies, then he has more time to amass more donations from them. So his would likely be greater, but still, it shows, even understanding that, it shows an immense number of donations from healthcare, health insurance. And they knew what they were getting for their money. They knew that if they got Biden into office, they would not have to fear that he would give everyone Medicare for all or some other form of single payer.
And just to give you an idea of what this looks like for folks in the midst of a pandemic and an economic freefall, health coverage purchased through the ACA marketplace cost 83% more than Medicaid coverage.
Oh my God.
And ACA plans leave patients with 10 times the amount of out-of-pocket costs. And this is according to a recent study by the Journal of the American Medical Association. And basically, the researchers who put out this report concluded that marketplace plans cost so much more than Medicaid because private insurers pay, quote, higher prices for the same services. No shit. As someone who has been on both Medicaid and not on Medicaid, I can tell you that the level of health coverage and insurance and service that I get is about the same, except when I'm not on Medicaid, at the end of every fucking visit, and now it's time for your copay. And these are, visits where there's at times nothing even gets done. It could be like just a checkup where your doctor looks at you and says, it looks good to me. You're not fucking bleeding out of anything. So, see you next year.
Give us a call when you start bleeding out of something.
Right. So this is the whole point, right? People oftentimes say that, well, we can't have Medicare for all because the quality of care will plummet. No, it won't.
It's already plummeted.
Well, and not only that, it's like as if getting Medicare for all would mean that we no longer use doctors and we just use like this guy on the corner who's been spinning, signs for the going out of business beef jerky store. No, you still have doctors. Like
at least he's good with his hands.
Which is really all I want out of a doctor. So, the idea that somehow the quality of care would plummet if the structure that provides that care changes is fucking stupid.
The other argument that I think is ridiculous is they go, well, Americans like their choice. They want their choice.
Yeah.
It's like 15 million Americans have lost their choice of health insurance because they lost their job over the pandemic. Even if there weren't a pandemic, every time someone loses their job, they lose their choice of their health insurance. Like, it's such a fucking stupid thing because you know how many people lose their health insurance because either they switch jobs, change jobs, they fucking lose their job. Like, the idea that you have some grand and wonderful choice right now is garbage.
Right. And the other point, I mean, there are several points here, but, a lot of people with that trope about choice, well, if your choice is between several different, like you've got the bronze level plan and the dit level plan, well, if they're all not like financially accessible, does it fucking matter that you have a lot of choice? Oh, well, this one's $1,200 a month, but the least expensive is $500. Well, what if you don't have $500 a month? Well, then what do you do? Oh, I don't know. You just don't have fucking health insurance. But at least you had a choice. That's a fucking hell of a choice.
That's another great point. Is let's assume they do have enough money for the lowest level, but most people are going to choose the one of the lower one of the more affordable ones than the most expensive one. So when we run around going, well, at least they have a choice. What did you choose? The cheapest one. Oh, wow. What a wonderful choice. You got to make that choice for the cheapest one because it's the one you could afford.
Yeah.
It's like, what?
America.
Yeah. Wow. Look at me. I got a choice. It's like such a, I mean, it's just a fucking like ruse. Like, oh, I got such a choice, even though you're choosing the cheapest one.
And this is just the monthly cost. Then we get into the fucking cesspool of deductibles. So a deductible basically means like how much do you have to pay out of pocket before your health insurance that you've been paying for every goddamn month actually kicks in. So again, I can't remember where I heard this, but insurance is like the best racket in the world. You pay every month for something that you don't need, and then when you finally need it, they won't pay you.
Yeah.
So basically, the average deductible on the marketplace for a bronze plan is about $6,000, which means that you have to pay $6,000 out of pocket before your insurance kicks in and covers the cost.
And then a lot of them have a cap, like at $100,000 or $200,000 or something.
Right.
So if you actually end up with, something serious like cancer treatments and stuff, you can
or
go
COVID treatment.
You can go over those caps.
Right, and there are plenty of reports since the beginning of the pandemic that folks are leaving the hospital after getting treated for COVID with hospital bills in like the six figures, and that's. I mean, what the fuck are you supposed to do with that? There's no, I mean, good luck. Yeah.
You just got to cough on your doctor on the way out.
Well, it's not, I mean, fair, but it's not the doctor's fault that the system's fucked.
I blame the doctor.
If we could
nurses.
line up, like if we could just put like Biden and then like the long line of fucking health and big pharma insurance company bullshit, I'd set up a fucking coughing round robin for those assholes.
All right, let's move on to the amazing steps the Biden administration is going to take on Cuba. Let's begin with what Trump did to Cuba. One positive thing, one thing that you might be able to say Obama was less right-wing about was easing tensions or whatever, renewing relations with Cuba. And then Trump immediately undid that and started putting sanctions on them. How many sanctions? Funny you should ask. Cuban Foreign Affairs Ministry's official, Johanna Tablada, on Wednesday informed that former U.S. President Donald Trump's arbitrary sanctions against her country left a damage of $20 billion on Cuba. Now, also keep in mind that the dollar goes a lot farther in Cuba, so a lot further. So $20 billion in Cuba has got to be, like $100 billion here. Trump, to continue the quote, Trump, who concluded his presidential term on Wednesday, imposed over 240 unilateral measures against Cuba from 2017. And then she says, quote, he took advantage until the very last moment. Trump identified COVID-19 as an opportunity to, and really the Trump administration, identified COVID-19 as an opportunity to assault Cuba with additional coercive measures rather than allowing relief. And then on January 11th, so 9 days before Trump flew off into the sunset, weirdly playing YMCA as he left, for those of you who didn't see that, literally,
can we
he
just
gets
take
to
a
the
moment?
end of his speech and he goes, goodbye, I'll be back, or whatever he said, hits the final note, walks off stage, and blasting out of the speakers, YMCA, young man, come and get clean, young man, or whatever the fucking lyrics are. It's fucking bizarre. It is bizarre.
And I personally feel that not enough people have talked about this, okay? The final sound of his presidency.
Where you can hang out with all the boys. Hey!
Why is no one talking about this? Come on.
I think people are afraid that to make fun of it is to be anti-gay, but it's not the gay thing that I find hilarious.
No, it's the stark juxtaposition.
It's the juxtaposition of this song with his goodbye is bizarre.
No, I mean, look, I love that song. I just never in a million years thought that would be the final sound of a presidency.
Then the next one, which perhaps fits a little better after that song ended and he's still walking up the stairs to the Air Force One, was Rocket Man by Elton John. But apparently...
what else was on that playlist? Like Ricky Martin and
apparently
Boy George.
Earlier,
like, what the fuck?
Earlier, before his speech, they played, also by Village People, Macho Man. I want to be a macho man.
Okay. I don't actually know how you do your job, Lee, because the more time passes, the more I feel that I'm actually just living in a giant fucking joke, and I'm waiting for the punchline.
For those of you who think this is a joke, and I must have misheard it, or it was someone's broadcast.
I heard it too.
Go and look up C-SPAN's coverage of Trump's final speech. Literally, goodbye America, YMCA. It doesn't make any sense. It's fucking bizarre.
Also, spoiler, he was not going to the Y. Like, he's flying to his hotel. He's not flying to some, local community center.
Oh, my God. I think, here's my theory. I know perhaps people would want, because it has become a gay anthem, and perhaps people want to say that this is some sort of, subconscious homosexual beliefs of Trump or feelings. But I think it's that Trump wants, he's dying to show he is the toughest man, the biggest man, the most alpha male. His ego is wrapped up in being the biggest, toughest guy. But I think because he is this pampered little rich boy from New York City who has been rich his whole life, he doesn't know what a tough, rugged guy looks like. Like even George W. Bush, even though it was an act, I'm from Texas, it's still he was mimicking like a kind of Western hero or something, you know, this
The
this
lone
old
Marlboro man type.
yeah, the Marlboro man shit. Whereas Trump doesn't know how to do it, so he just hears lyrics. Oh, Macho Man, play Macho Man. That makes me Macho Man. That makes me I'm a Macho Man.
But then tell me, where does you can get yourself clean, you can have a good meal tie into that? Where does that tie in?
Well, he does pride himself on being clean. Although I always wondered if he scrubs in that fold in his neck that kind of oozes. It kind of oozes over the top of the collar. And I was wondering, does he have like a loofah on a stick or something? Like, how do you get up in the crevice there?
No, just no.
Oh my God! All right, so that might have been a slight tangent.
I think it was necessary because I want to know.
No, I know. It makes me angry.
No one has answered this for me, and I want an answer.
There's been, when I posted it on Twitter, a couple of people were also talking about it, but it was not like, it should have been a wave. It should have been a Twitter ocean that just took over the country.
How can you let that go? Like,
I don't know.
And the best part of the, I think, like, what were you watching, CNN? Like, because you were Lee was watching it, and then he immediately pulled out the earphones, and he was like, "Do you hear this? Do you hear this?" And I was like, "What? What the fuck?" And the best part about this whole thing was that, you know, CNN was covering this last moment of Trump's presidency, but they didn't mention it at all.
They never.
It's in the background because they're still like live from Trump's, you know, last moments of his presidency, and they're like, well, you know, Bob, I felt that, you know, him talking about bringing prosperity to America and making it great again, and it's all fucking playing in the background, and nobody's talking about it. And I'm like, how can you honestly have a newscast right now? How the fuck can you sit there and talk without mentioning? By the way, does anybody fucking hear this right now?
I mean, it'd be like if someone had one of those like radio show fart cannon noises, and they were just playing it in the background, and meanwhile the CNN hosts were like, "Well, there goes the president of the United. There goes the president of the United States. He's getting on the plane." And yeah, it was bizarre.
Okay.
Totally bizarre. So,
thank you. I feel better now just getting that off my chest.
Cuba. Last thing I was going to say about from this quote is former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo announced Cuba's inclusion on the U.S. list of state sponsors of terrorism 9 days before they left office. State sponsors of terrorism. Cuba has not sponsored a terrorist thing fucking in decades, if ever. And on top of that, they are like, the international thing they're known for is shipping doctors around the world.
I was just going to say, basically, like, the images you see of Cubans going around the world are doctors that have literally been, and during the pandemic, and I know I've mentioned this on the podcast before, but I'll mention it again because it bears repeating. Recently, or last year, there was a huge projection in, I can't remember which Italian city it was, but they basically projected on a giant fucking building that said "Grazie Cuba," which means "thank you Cuba," because Cuba shipped doctors to Italy, which was the epicenter of the pandemic for quite some time last year. And they've been shipping doctors around the world because they have, what is it, interferon or... Yeah, they had specific, their doctors and their medical research, which, by the way, among other things, has like a vaccine against lung cancer. Their medical research has been fucking phenomenal. And so their doctors, which were also clutch in the Ebola epidemic a few years back, have been really clutch during this COVID pandemic as well. And so that's the image of Cuba from around the world. Meanwhile, what does the U.S. ship around the world? Fucking troops and fucking weapons.
Terrorism. But we're not a state sponsor of terror, though.
No.
And here's the thing: is like, yes, we're talking about Trump, and I think anytime we did do an extended rant of how terrible Trump was, people are gonna say, "Oh, it's over, move on." This was supported and continues to be supported by all of our mainstream media, by many of the Democrats, either through their silence or through their active, support. And like during this, so you could say, oh well, Obama eased tensions and normalized relations, and then Trump went backwards on that. Yeah, well, guess what? The media supported Trump in all of his garbage against Cuba. They spent like a year saying that the diplomats, and they continue doing this, were attacked by a sound cannon. And
oh my God.
Destroyed their brain balls, and it turned out it was crickets mating. Literally, you can read an AP article where they say scientists have finally figured out the noise. It was crickets, and yet they support our media supported all of this shit. So, what will Biden do? Well, Biden is signaling. Let's see. This is another quote. 2 officials in Biden's administration said Cuba's support of Nicolas Maduro in Venezuela and the Cuban military's control of what? The nation, I guess? Are defining issues, according to John Kovalik, the president of the US-Cuba Trade and Economic Council, a private organization based out of New York. Quote, the Biden administration will not be rescuing Cuba from the problems of its own making. Quote, we don't anticipate decisions to enhance the role of the Cuban government in supporting their tourism sector. And let's see, adding that the approach to Venezuela and Cuba will be based upon communication rather than isolation. Of their own creation, we have put economic crushing sanctions, economic war on Venezuela and Cuba, and their problems are due to that.
You know what? This literally reminds me of if anybody ever watches like, crime shows or, like Sherlock Holmes or something. This reminds me of when somebody shoots a guy, then they put the gun in his hand and are like, well, look, he committed suicide. That's exactly what this is. We have waged economic warfare, and yes, it is warfare because people die. The U.S. government has waged economic warfare against Cuba and Venezuela and many others, but specifically those are being discussed right now, against Cuba and Venezuela, and then we turn around and we're like, I don't know why these countries are so fucking poor. This is absurd. And it's like, yeah, it is absurd. We're not going
to help them with their problems.
Yeah. It's like, well, maybe, and I mean, there's so much documentation about this, but just something like, banks that have holdings of Venezuela's money that refuse to release it to Venezuela, but then they release it to Guaido.
It's the Bank of England, and it's billions of dollars that the Venezuela has in the Bank of England that they refuse to give them.
And then the U.S. is like, I don't understand why you're poor. I mean, we're just not letting anybody give you money or trade with you. I don't understand.
What's the issue? Speaking of the gun thing, great Bill Hicks bit where he's talking about Iraq, and this was the first war in Iraq in the 90s, and he's talking about how we claim that Iraq had like weapons, and he was like, how do we know? We sold them to him. We have the receipt. And he then said, it's like the movie Shane, where Shane says to the little farmer, he throws a gun at his feet and he goes, "Pick up the gun." And he's like, "I don't want to, sir. I don't want to pick up the gun." Pick up the gun. but sir, if I pick up the gun, I think you might shoot me. I don't want to pick up. I'm not going to pick up the gun. Pick up the gun. Well, okay, sir. I'll pick up the gun, but don't shoot me. Okay. I'm gonna pick up the gun. You saw him. He had a gun.
That's brilliant. Yeah. Yes.
That's what we like to do. But so that's on Cuba. Biden's stance seems to maybe be to talk to them a little more, but not great. And then here's Biden on Iran, which we have crushed with our economic war as well. People in Iran are incredibly struggling and in
the midst of a pandemic.
In the midst of a pandemic, incredibly rough. Our mainstream media, our corporate media has celebrated all of this. They gave some criticism when Trump assassinated Iran's top general for nothing, basically just trying to start a horrible war. Trump and Israel, basically, with Israel's rooting him on, were trying to create some sort of back and forth with Iran where they could justify bombing them more heavily. Iran luckily didn't take the bait. But here's a quote from Bloomberg. Two officials in Biden's administration said, oh, wait, that's the Cuba quote. Okay, I don't have a quote on Iran, but with Iran, he wants to go back slightly more. There's basically competing viewpoints in Biden's administration so far. I realize not all of his officials are approved yet, but some want to go back to an Obama's deal. Others are trying to say, oh, no, it's different times. Times are different now. And we can't go back to the Obama deal.
Well, aren't some saying that basically, because Iran, as a protest, that's not COVID, as protest, basically started going against some of the agreements of the JCPOA, which is the Iran deal, as basically a sign to the rest of the world, because this wasn't just a deal between the United States and Iran. This was a global fucking deal that the U.S. basically backed out of. And so, backed out of sounds too nice. They fucking destroyed it. And so Iran basically said, well, then fuck you. We are going to move forward with some things that you didn't want us to move forward with, because now there's no fucking reason for us to be the honorable ones when you've shat all over the deal. So some people in the administration or some people in, that are against re-signing the deal are saying, well, Iran needs to reinstitute some of the agreements in the JCPOA. But why should Iran be the ones to make the first move to normalizing relations? Because there's no guarantee if they then go back to what the JCPOA states. There's no guarantee that the U.S. would sign on again. We've basically we've painted the U.S.
You paint them into a corner, yeah.
Well, and the U.S. has basically declared we can't be trusted when it comes to international deals. Yeah. So you shouldn't make the first move to normalizing relations, because we might just shit all over it. So really, there's no reason. There's absolutely no reason. There's no plus side for
and we
Iran
continue
to make the
help,
first move.
And we continue to help Israel assassinate their scientists, which is horrific, and a terror. I mean, how is that not terrorism? You're assassinating scientists. And for those of you who think these scientists just work on creating nuclear weapons, that is not true. These are nuclear power scientists. Anyway, here's a quote from Bloomberg with their manipulative language, but I think there's some truth here. President Joe Biden has done a good job so far of calming the anxieties that allies that the U.S. will rush into negotiations to re-enter the flawed 2015 nuclear deal with Iran. So Bloomberg clearly anti-nuclear deal, even though, the idea that, people are anxious that you might have peace with Iran is hilarious. So then they say he appointed Robert Malley, special envoy to Iran. On Iran, to continue the quote, other Biden advisors have been reassuring. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan said last month that it was really up to Iran whether the U.S. would re-enter the deal, meaning Iran must be in compliance with it before the U.S. lifts sanctions. Biden's nominee for Secretary of State, Tony Blinken, told the Senate that he wanted a, quote, longer and stronger nuclear deal with Iran, and pledged to consult regional allies such as Israel and the Arab Gulf monarchies if and when negotiations with Iran resumed. Yes, let's consult the people that want Iran turned into an impact crater before we strike a deal with them.
Right. And again, it's like they have to be in compliance with the deal that we shredded. That doesn't make any fucking sense. And what really pisses me off, obviously this pisses me off too, but one of the things that really pisses me off is that Europe and other nations that were a part of signing this deal have been fucking quiet. And Europe, the EU was a part of this deal. The EU should stand up and be like, all right, this is fucking stupid. The US, you should just absolutely sign on to this deal again and beg forgiveness for being a shitwit.
The EU likes to do passive-aggressive anti-U.S. stuff. They won't actually stand up to us. So what they did was stay in the deal while we pulled out. That was their passive-aggressive, like we're not going with the U.S. However, they didn't actually fight back against any of it. So.
Well, and it doesn't actually help because, I wouldn't even call it passive aggressive because it suggests that the Europe is somehow supporting Iran, which they're not. Iran has been hit incredibly hard by this new wave of economic warfare. So Europe has not come to the aid of Iran in the midst of a fucking pandemic. So this is really horrific, and in reality the US should be begging forgiveness and saying, I'm so sorry that happened, let's see how we can patch this up again and try to normalize relations here. And instead they're saying, no, I know that I hit you in the head with a rock, but now you have to pick up the rock and clean it. And it's just fucking so fucked.
Yeah, so anyway, I hope in this portion of the episode you've gotten excited for the Biden administration just getting underway.
Just in case, I released an article with Mint Press News late last week on Friday, which really highlights the realities of Biden and what we can expect from a Biden administration. So if you're curious about that, if this has whet your appetite, go over to mintpressnews.com and check that out, and just check out some of their other reporting because they really do great stuff.
Couple of quick notes. Our stuff is only supported by you all. There are no ads. You listen to your other podcasts and they either say, oh, we're going to take a quick break, and then it goes to some commercial about a mattress or some guy's underwear that covers up shit stains or whatever.
And we believe in neither mattresses nor underwear.
Oh, of course not. And it goes to that garbage, which is corporate America owning the content. If the stuff they're saying were to get too far afield from what is allowable for corporate America, then those commercials wouldn't be there. We're different. We don't have those ads. We don't get money from corporate America. We are only sponsored by you. You guys keep this show going. And we'd love for you to become a member, even at a low level, at patreon.com/commoncensored. So that's patreon.com/commoncensored. You can sign up at one of the tiers there and get extra content every single week. That would be awesome. Also, Eleanor's movie is at hardroadofhope.com. It's won all sorts of awards. You should check out that documentary. And my book is at leecampbook.com. We take your ideas and suggestions for topics or thoughts at commoncensored@protonmail.com. And lastly, all of Eleanor's work is at artkillingapathy.com.
Indeed. Okay, so I think we'll do one more before we head on over to that extra content.
Yes, shall we get into the latest label put on my YouTube videos?
This is pretty special.
So I try not to repeat too much content from one podcast to another, et cetera, but we do so much that I can guarantee you I will be mentioning this on Government Secrets as well. But I do another podcast. So does Eleanor's, by the way, are called Act Out and Silver Threads. But I do another podcast called Government Secrets, where Graham Elwood and I...
It's rad.
Thank you. Where Graham Elwood and I go through some of the biggest secrets of our government. So this week was part one of attacking a government secret you may have heard of called the Kennedy Assassination. And we go into JFK's assassination, and I spent the first part of a three-part series talking about all the evidence that he was shot from the front, or also shot from the front, but maybe exclusively shot from the front. And it wasn't just exclusively the back. And there is loads of evidence.
By the way, just so folks know, in order for him to have been shot from the book, I almost said suppository.
Every once in a while when I'm really into a book, I take it suppository. I do. I gotta tell you.
Why are those words so close? That's awful. God, the English language is stupid. Anyway.
Well, it is nice because at the book suppository, you can just back up to the building and they will insert
here
the book of your choice.
Wait, does that mean that I don't have to read? Like I could just take
oh,
in
yeah,
the information?
You just take in the information, yep. By osmosis.
But
Hey-oh! I win.
No.
Ching, 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 ching.
Bad. Oh, God. I'm so sorry, folks.
What were you about to say?
I should never tell you when I have these thoughts. No, but in order for him to have been shot in the back of the head, he basically for it to have been the book depository where Oswald was, that's where
Oswald,
the idea from him being shot in the back of
right.
the head, that's that line.
Oswald
There's no way that Oswald in
right.
the book depository could have shot him in the front of the head. That's why this information matters.
Right. Oswald was clearly behind him at the time, behind where the cars were and everything. So in order for it to believe the official story, you'd have to believe Kennedy was only shot from the back. However, what ended up happening to Kennedy's head, unfortunately, clearly proves that at least one and possibly more bullets hit him from the front because the back of his head basically exploded off, which is what happens when a bullet enters from the front. And anyway, so I go through all that evidence. If you want to listen to it, you can just look up government secrets. But we put the video on YouTube. By the time you hear this, it should be up as well at youtube.com/momentofclarity. It'll be interesting to see if they put the same warning on that video. But it's up right now on Graham's page. And underneath it, and I don't know when they started doing this one, because I've had other warnings on my, on Redacted Tonight. They have a big warning underneath that says, this is all about Russia. And I've had, if you talk about COVID-19 in any form, they say COVID-19 is, here's the truth about it or whatever. But I hadn't seen this one before. If you talk about the Kennedy assassination, they do a big blue, like larger than the other warnings I've seen, link to the Kennedy assassination, and actually, you talk for a second while I pull this up.
But it's a link to Wikipedia, which as soon as
No, it's a link to Encyclopedia Britannica. But
the
other ones
it said Wikipedia.
The other ones are linked to Wikipedia. So the one about Russia, the one about COVID, those are Wikipedia. This one is Encyclopedia Britannica. But
Encyclopedia Britannica has an entry on JFK's assassination?
Yeah, they got all kinds of shit. But anyway,
all right.
What they show in the little caption beneath the video, besides linking to Britannica, it says, assassination of John F. Kennedy, mortal shooting of John F. Kennedy, the 35th President of the United States, as he rode in a motorcade in Dallas, Texas on November 22nd, 1963. His accused killer was Lee Harvey Oswald. And this is my favorite part. A former U.S. Marine who had embraced Marxism and defected for a time to the Soviet Union. Even if that were true, like I don't know everything about Oswald's life. Let's say he did embrace Marxism. What the fuck does that have to do with Kennedy's assassination? And considering all the evidence that this was not just Oswald, like plastering Marxism and Soviet Union across this thing is hilarious.
Well, but also if you look, which you've done, Lee, if you look at what Kennedy was trying to do, he was actually trying to facilitate peace with the Soviet Union,
yeah.
And Cuba. He didn't want any part of this whole fucking cold into hot war. So even if this is true, it wouldn't make sense for someone who's Marxist and a pro-Soviet Union person to kill Kennedy. It would make more sense for them to want to kill like his chiefs of staff that were like, we have to go to war with the Soviet Union.
Right.
So even if that's fucking true, it would make no fucking sense.
There's a lot of evidence, and including Kennedy's speeches, showing that while he did facilitate kind of the Cold War in Vietnam in the beginning of his time in office, he was going through a very clear change where he was against nuclear war, trying to create nuclear test bans. The military wanted him to invade Cuba which, like during the Bay of Pigs, they wanted a full invasion of Cuba, not just the people that were sent in the Bay of Pigs. And they thought the Bay of Pigs, which they knew would fail, would be a way to get him to fully invade Cuba. Mm-hmm. And he refused, and he realized afterwards that he'd been kind of duped by the Joint Chiefs of Staff and everything into this Bay of Pigs catastrophe. Anyway, but that's kind of not the point. The point
I know.
is,
It's just...
No. I'm glad you said that. The point is that that YouTube is now involved in basically pushing up, enforcing CIA lies. Or, kind of this false history of America. I can't wait till we'll post a video called The Truth About Columbus, and they'll say, here's a link to the Wikipedia about how Columbus was a great man. He discovered America. He was just a wonderful dude. Like, where does it end? Yeah. I mean, this is a level of, it's really a level of disgusting, because you've got to realize that, like, with Wikipedia, although it is incorrect and kind of a liberal whitewashing of a lot of these things, like they'll talk about the controversy of Columbus, but they're not going to focus on that, like they'll do that kind of thing. And, when Guaido announced he was president, they initially called him the interim president, and then they switched back. And there's a lot of garbage on Wikipedia. But at least with Wikipedia, you are going there and looking up an article to see what Wikipedia says about what such and such. In this case, it is my discussion with Graham and our listeners about what the fuck, happened with JFK assassination, and we've got a giant plastered fucking link and signage saying, Oswald Marx's Soviet Union killed Kennedy. Whackity smackity do. And you're like, oh, fuck yourselves.
Yeah, it's such like an overt and desperate attempt to uphold the United States government's narrative about, well, really everything, but in particular those aspects that like kind of linchpins in like the American exceptionalism, that facade, like JFK's assassination, if it were to come out that it was in fact the United States government that assassinated its own, CEO, so to speak, its own, commander in chief, that's fucking huge. And It really speaks to, it speaks to how the intelligence agencies and how the deep state really drives the interests of the U.S. government. And so, of course, that's something that they absolutely don't want to come out. And it's why, another reason that the term conspiracy theorist really comes from the conversations around JFK's assassination. That's where the term conspiracy theorist was born, from people who were asking questions and saying, this shit don't fit. And then, of course, the U.S. government, with help of the corporate media, it wasn't quite the corporate media back then, but with help of the media, started putting out this, like, oh, look at these fucking conspiracy theorists, they're fucking wackadoo.
Hilariously, now we have our mainstream media perpetrating and involved in a 4-year hilarious conspiracy theory about Russia colluding with the Trump campaign to rig the election. And every day they said, oh, let's give you more of our kind of made-up theory about this, even though it has collapsed on every level. So they're the loony conspiracy theorists, and yet, me and Graham try and talk about the JFK assassination, and we're off base, and YouTube wants to let you know.
Yeah. So that's super fucked. Before we sign off, I just want to mention real quick, this will be in the show notes. So if y'all are listening to this, wherever you're listening to this, just wanted to let y'all know that in the show notes, there's a link to a GoFundMe for a storytelling and podcasting project that we're doing here in Washington, D.C. And the point being that storytelling is radical. Storytelling from the grassroots is a way to counter, just like we kind of talked about with the whole JFK thing. And
This project's awesome.
Indeed, the podcasting that we're doing, it's a way to counter the whitewashed and factually inaccurate history that is promoted in schools, that's promoted in corporate media, and instead, give voice and give a platform to the stories that are our histories and the people's stories. And so this is a project that really speaks to that idea. And so we're raising funds so that we can get that off the ground and get some of the stories of what was once known as Chocolate City, which is DC, to get those stories out there and filling in a lot of the holes that exist in the history of DC in particular. So if y'all are looking at the show notes, there's going to be a link there. Any little donation helps to get us gear and to provide stipends for some of the folks that we'd like to share stories with us. So check that out.
And if you don't have time to look at the show notes, you can get to that link to that GoFundMe by going to tinyurl.com, tinyurl.com/Ward1podcast.
Oh, thanks.
WARD, the number 1 podcast. tinyurl.com, Ward 1 podcast.
Lee just did that while I was talking. That was so cool of you.
I did it while she was talking. And because in DC, we're separated into wards. So we're Ward 1.
Yeah.
Thank you guys for joining us, and please head on over to patreon.com/commoncensored, both to join as a member and to hear the next 10 to 15 minutes we're going to do over there, and we love y'all. We'll likely be doing a live stream this weekend, so keep an eye out, and keep fighting.
Act out.